nerve exam is normal for a man his age. Just remember, when you look at a 79-year-old patient, you would consider their skills and in light of their age. The other thing is that I failed to put in here, and I apologize for that, was all sensations from this upper extremity were fine. So we'll come back to this after we reviewed a few things. Now, lobes of the cerebral cortex. We know there's a frontal lobe right here, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, temporal lobe here, and deep to the Sylvian fissure, the lateral fissure, is the insular lobe. The only other lobe we have, the limbic, is on the, we don't have it there. Oh my God. Anyway, okay, we'll talk about the limbic lobe anyway. The limbic lobe is on the mid-sagittal surface, best seen on the mid-sagittal surface. The two major fissures in this view are the central sulcus, which is right here, and the lateral sulcus, which is right here, and they are really consistent. If you look along the edge of the hemisphere right here, we have to have some way to demarc the occipital lobe from the lobe rostral, which is some landmark. And if you look at a specimen in the lab, you will see along this inferior edge of the hemisphere, if you just look at it this way, there's a high spot here, which is called the preoccipital notch. Preoccipital notch. Again, the word tells you before the occipital. If you draw a line sort of like that up to the edge of the hemisphere, in general, that comes right out about the level of the parietal occipital sulcus, which is on the mid-sagittal view in general. And then this demarks on the lateral view. This indicates the position of the occipital view. And of course, here is the lateral view of the hemisphere. Here's the central sulcus right here, precentral, postcentral. So we see that there's a precentral sulcus right here, a postcentral sulcus right here, that are specifically related to. There's the insular. Okay. We don't have a limit. Okay, so we have a two sulci, the central sulcus and lateral, the most prominent and most consistent on the lateral view of the hemisphere. And of course, they demarcate the temporal lobe from the other three lobes, and the central sulcus demarcates frontal from parietal. Okay, now let's look a little bit at this. I know when you go to name gyrite, the immediate reaction, including mine when I was taking neuro, was, how am I going to learn all this? This is all these things, gyrite. Well, all the frontal ones are frontal. All the temporal ones are temporal. And they're named according to the general position on the hemisphere. Superior frontal gyrus, middle frontal, inferior frontal. If they're superior, they're above. If they're middle, in the middle, and so on and so forth. Central sulcus is right here, so this is precentral gyrus right here. Now, as you look at this little homunculus right here, sort of the little man on the side of the hemisphere, there's we'll call this, for this illustration point, this is the precentral gyrus right here, so it's right here. So you can see the hand and the face occupy a lot of the precentral gyrus. That is the symmetrotopic map of the body in the motor cortex. The lower extremity hangs over the edge in the in the anterior paracentral. So the lower extremity is in the anterior paracentral in general, and the upper extremity and face are in the precentral. Now, what this tells you, just sort of having an idea of what this looks like, what this tells you is motor movements of the face are really precise and really detailed. Motor movements of the hand are really precise and really detailed, but of the rest of the upper extremity, which is right there, is not so much so. So there's a representation in the cortex of the degree of ability in both motor and sensory. So in the frontal lobe, we have superior, middle, inferior, postcentral gyrus, or postcentral gyrus, and area, your motor cortex is area 4. Parietal is right here. This is the postcentral gyrus here, precentral here. That is area 312. And then we have a supramarginal gyrus and an angular gyrus, which around the upper end of the superior temporal fissure. And the occipital gyri are back here, and of course they are concerned with vision on the mid-sagittal side. Okay, we open up the lateral sulcus right here. Actually, I cut out a little piece of it and then spread it apart. This is the insular lobe right here. It is made up of short gyri like this one and long gyri back here like these right here. And it is called short gyri, long gyri. And there is a central sulcus of the insula, which is right here, which basically divides it into sort of the homologue of the pre and post-central gyri on the lateral surface of the hemisphere. Now, this gyrus right here is a transverse temporal gyrus. I'm sorry it's not on the list. Transverse temporal gyrus. It is primary auditory cortex. It is, yes, ma'am.
Can you show us the diagram?
Right there. Transverse temporal gyrus, the eponym is of Heschel. And I don't know who Heschel was. I tried to look up these guys and see who they were. I don't know who Heschel was. Obviously an auditory guy. It is Brodmann's area 41. The area 4 is motor, the area 312 is sensory and stuff like that. I should say about sensory in the post-central gyrus, it's not 1, 2, 3. It's not areas 1, 2, 3. It's areas 3, 1, 2. The reason I say that is when Brodmann described all these things, he started his descriptions of the sensory cortex at the bottom of the central sulcus and then went up back of the sulcus and out into the parietal lobe. He had an area 3, then an area 1, and an area 2. So we respect that original description of Brodmann's area. And this, and like I say here, primary auditory cortex is area 41. Now you've heard all of us talk about primary cortex, primary visual, primary motor, primary sensory, and that is because there are secondary cortices in all these systems that are located around the primary cortex and talk to it. The primary cortex is the primary origin of motor information or the primary target of sensory information. Now, the blood vessels in the lateral view of the hemisphere right here. Here we see this is the inferior paternal gyrus right there. The central sulcus is about right there. Lateral sulcus is nicely shown here. The blood supply after the branching of the internal carotid into anterior and middle carotid is made up of these 4 branches. An M1, what's called M1, which is located here and gives rise to arteries which serve the lenticular nuclei. Inside the hemisphere, the branches come off and penetrate the ventral surface of the hemisphere and serve the lenticular nucleus. M2, which is right here, is the one on the surface of the insula. The M1 branches into a superior trunk that goes up and an inferior trunk that goes down. So there's a short M2 right here and a long one right here. This one is laying on the surface of the cortex. And these vessels all go up and then they make a sharp bend. The bend is on now giving a vessel that is located on the internal surface of the frontal lobe, the temporal lobe, and so on and so forth. And these are called operculum. And I think I told some people in class, it's like your lips. If you look in the mirror, the lateral sulcus is where your lips are. If you pull it down and up, you expose your teeth, which is like the insular cortex. That's the relationship. Operculum means lid or lip. So once they get under the surface of the inner surface of the operculum, they are M3, and then they go through the lateral sulcus and branch onto the cortex. They are M4. So these are the 4 segments of the middle cerebral artery, and this gives you a way to think about, well, where are they? The ones you see in the cortex are M4. And when you see the common carotid or internal carotid, branching into its initial branches, that little segment about 3/4 of an inch long is M1. And we know now that the M1 gives rise to the blood supply to the inferior nuclei. Any questions? Okay, now let's look at a mid-sagittal view here. This is our mid-sagittal view. We have frontal, final, occipital, temporal, and now we have a limbic lobe right here. A limbic lobe is made up of the cingulate gyrus, which is located immediately superior to the corpus callosum. This part that bends around here, which is the isthmus of the cingulate gyrus, and then it continues, we don't see it here, but it continues onto the medial and inferior surface of the hemisphere as the parahippocampal gyrus. So those are the three main parts of the limbic lobe, and we can see two of them from this view right here. So we have the one thing I want to draw your attention to, the cingulate sulcus is coming along here, and then you see it abruptly bends up like that. That is what's called the marginal sulcus, or the marginal branch of the cingulate sulcus. I don't know which one to use. Why is that important? Who cares? Only Dr. Haynes cares, right? Who cares? Well, we have to have a way of identifying the position of the lower extremity part of the cortices on the mid-sagittal view. Well, this is where we get it. The marginal sulcus, which is right here, is immediately in front of that right there is the posterior crescental gyrus, primary somatomotor cortex for the lower extremity. And here it is right here. I notice the foot is smaller than the hand, so it has less representation. Although you can tell whether somebody's hammering on your big toe or the second toe, you can tell that. But it's not quite as good as that. That little divot right there is a tiny little piece of the central sulcus that is peeking over the edge of the hemisphere. And most of the time you see that on most brains, MRIs, or on mid-sagittal MRIs, almost all of them have that. So if you draw a line straight down here, then that's the junction of anterior paracentral gyrus, which is right here, and posterior. So then it's the motor and central area for the lower extremity. Now, I've told everybody that will listen in class that mid-sagittal view of the brain is a really important view because there's so many things you can pick out here on the mid-sagittal, and there's so many things deep to each of those points that you can relate to other structures inside the hemisphere. What is this right here? Be specific.
Splenium of the corpus callosum.
Splenium of the corpus callosum. Okay? We're going to come back and look at that in a little while later in the lecture. We have a rostrum right here, a genu right here, a bend, a knee, and a body right here, and a splenium right here. Just keep that image in mind. It'll come in handy. Okay? Now the posterior fibers going to the distribution of the posterior cerebral artery. Posterior cerebral artery originates from the basilar, comes up, there's a basilar bifurcation, and then we get the posterior cerebral arteries here, here, and wrapping all the way around and going this way. The branches of it are called pre-communicating, which we have right here, pre-communicating, before the posterior communicating arteries. We have post-communicating right here, which is a little section right here, off of which several important arteries come, one being thalamo-geniculate. And then we have a section that's further around the hemisphere, which I would call the temporal segment, because it is designated by branches of BCA who go to the temporal lobe, the medial surface of the temporal lobe. And then P4 is legal cortex. So again, this sort of puts everything, the anatomy of the vessel in the context of what it's doing. Pre-communicating has some important vessels right here that we talked about and we'll repeat again. Post-communicating, the same thing. The temporal branches are just temporal branches. We're not going to give them any special designation. And they would be called temporal because they're big vessels coming on and going on the inferior surface of the temporal lobe. And visual cortex is calcium itself, and the area immediately above and below. Any questions? Okay. Here we see the BCA coming back. These would be P4 branches here, P3 branches here. We're going to the temporal lobe, going out towards the lateral side of the temporal lobe. And then P1 and P2 are branches right here, which is not a detail here. Okay. How are these these two images similar, and how are they different? Just take a minute and look at them. They are both actual views. They are both T2 views, which means the surface sonic fluid is white. So how are they similar and how are they different? Anybody give me a shot? Remember, any guesses are not right or wrong with this. We're all learning together. I still learn. I know that's not a big advice. I just don't sit in class. Okay? What territory is this right here? Where's the lesion? Medial part of the occipital lobe. Got it? Everybody agree? Yes? Okay, medial part of the occipital lobe. So for PCA, what part is it?
P4.
Say again?
P4.
P4, absolutely correct. The person has serious visual problems in one half of each visual field. And you're going to get a lecture from Dr. McCall on that. Okay, look over at this one. Looks fine, right? Clean. But now you look up here, what is this region right here? Well, same region right there. What is it right here? What part of the brain? Somebody guess. Encephalon. It's thalamus. Even though it's not a brain slice, it's thalamus. Okay? And here you have a defect right there. So how is this one related to that one? Both of these are PCA. One is distal, out in the hemisphere at its terminus. One is of a proximal branch. This is the thalamo-genicular branch right here, which comes off the P2. So they're both related to PCA territories. One is a branch of PCA, and one is the most distal part of the main vessel. Everybody see it? So they're both PCA. It's just a slightly different version of it. And that's actually a very common thing. You have a plug up of the main stalk, you get everything distal to that. Or you have a plug up of a branch of the main stalk, and you have everything distal to that, but it's not the whole vessel's territory. Everybody follow? And that's a real, and it becomes, as you get better at this, becomes a really easy way to figure out what's going on. Any question on that? Superior view of the hemisphere. This is the central sulcus right there. The central sulcus right there. Precentral gyrus right there. And you can see the longitudinal view right there, that groove going there. And you see the same groove over here. There it is right there. Going forward. This is the superior frontal gyrus. This is the middle frontal gyrus. And the groove is the superior frontal sulcus. And then, of course, here's precentral gyrus right here, postcentral gyrus right here, and frontal lobe back here, and that's the occipital pole of the hemisphere. There's a temporal pole, a frontal pole, and an occipital pole, which is just the most rostral end. Okay, let's talk a little bit about internal capsule, or some students, sometimes involved in a trend in learning, call the infernal capsule. Don't write that down. Internal capsule made up of 5 parts. An anterior limb, which is located between the lenticular nucleus and the head of the part. A posterior limb right here, which is made up of the branch between the thalamus and the lenticular nucleus. And the genu, where those two structures meet. The retrolenticular limb is the white area right here immediately caudal to the lenticular nucleus. Retrolenticular, behind the lenticular nucleus. And the last one, which is the sublenticular limb, it actually goes from the medial geniculum body somewhere in this area here, underneath the lenticular nucleus and over into the temporal cortex. We do not try to identify sublenticular on a specimen or any kind of image because it's really hard to figure it out. So we just let it alone. You do need to know that auditory radiations go through the sublenticular limb of the internal capsule. So these are the 4 main parts, and each one of these parts parts have particular pathways going through them. So let's look at this. Now, first thing is don't freak out. You don't have to learn everything on the slide. Okay? Take a deep breath. Now, but you do need to be aware of the things in the red circles. Now, we're going to just mention those briefly. Here you see the blue structures right here represent the internal capsule. This is the rectolenticular limb area right here. And let's start with the ones you've already talked about in some detail. Corticonuclear fibers are found in the genital of the internal capsule. These are fibers coming from the motor cortex and going to motor nuclei of cranial nerves. Some of them are bilateral, and some go to the contralateral side, the opposite side. And we've touched on those already. Okay, the posterior limb of the internal capsule is all this, contains all this stuff here. The only ones I'm going to mention here are corticospinal fibers, which are found in this area here. Corticospinal, lower extremity, thorax, upper extremity. You know there's no head in that map because the head is represented by the corticonuclear fibers at the genital. So the body is a little bit separated in the map of the internal capsule, and that's okay because the fibers are coming from slightly different areas. Okay, corticospinal, corticonuclear we talked about. Allogothalamic. I want you to be aware of that term. We're going to talk about those fibers in a week or so. What does the name tell you? Allogothalamic. It's from globus pallidus to thalamus. So they're conveying information from the basal nuclei, of which the globus pallidus is part, and into the thalamus. Allogothalamic fibers. And they cross more anterior parts of the internal capsule right here, coming from the medial part of the globus pallidus, crossing and eventually end up in the thalamus, in the ventrolateral nucleus of the thalamus. Superior thalamic radiations. I mention those only because they're all kind of spread all over the place here, because they are fibers coming from the sensory nuclei of the thalamus and going to the sensory cortex. And so they are just broadly classified as superior thalamic radiation. They're going out to the posterior limb of the internal capsule. And we have a lot of information coming from the thalamus going up through this area. We also have stuff coming from the anterior part of the thalamus and going up towards the frontal lobe, and they are the anterior thalamic radiation. This gives them a name with a relative position. And anterior thalamic radiations are found primarily in the anterior limb of the internal capsule. Now, the other ones are auditory radiations right here, which come through the sublenticular limb of the internal capsule. Those will be mentioned in more detail later. And we have optic radiations coming back from the lateral genicular nucleus, so they're going to the primary visual cortex. Primary visual cortex is area 17. And you may have, in some of your reading, come across area 17, 18, and 19. Okay, 18 and 19 are visual association cortices. So when you look at something, you see it. That's an area 17 primary responsibility. But then when you look at that thing, you think, oh man, that reminds me of a sandwich I had that, last week at such and such a restaurant. Man, it was really good. Okay, the visual image has associated to other parts of the cortex and brought up a memory related to that input. The same thing happens with auditory association. So optic radiations end in Brodmann's area 17, but then around it, above it and below the calcium sulcus, there is areas 18 and 19. As a matter of fact, I'm sure Dr. Holly will tell you about this. Visual input is interesting in terms of it occupies a lot of areas of the cerebral cortex. Primary visual cortex is kind of small. Association gets bigger, and then there's a large temporal area that also is concerned with visual stuff. Not seeing, but visual association stuff. You all understand what I mean by association? Okay? It's a nucleus that doesn't help you see anything, but it helps you associate that with other functions of the cerebral cortex. Everybody got this? Anterior thalamic radiation in the anterior limb, corticonuclear in the genitive, palato-thalamic we'll talk about later, and then the corticospinal is in the posterior limb, somatotopically represented, so that the lower extremity is more caudal, upper extremity is more anterior. Many, many years ago, when I was a graduate student in the late 1800s, they thought all these fibers, I think we have to have a certain levity in the course, right? It's okay to take a drop and make fun of themselves. No, I say that because information changes. Many, many years ago, we were taught that this bundle here was right up here. Well, through a lot of different things, experimentation, all kinds of stuff, we found out that these occupy about half of the internal consonant. There's something else in the anterior half, of which we give a couple of examples there. Question? Okay, so again, we've talked about a bunch of this already. Okay, the diencephalon in the axial section. This is the axial section right here. Here we have anterior limb, genitive, posterior limb back here, retroradicular limb, thalamus right here. Lobus pallidus, dependent, head quadrant. Everybody oriented? Okay. And here we have thalamus on this side, right here. Thalamus on this side a little bigger. And third ventricle right here. Posterior commissure right there. Again, you can think of the mid-sagittal view and think of where's the posterior commissure. Okay, that gives you an idea right there. That's the end of the third ventricle. It stops there because right under the posterior commissure is the cerebral actinum. So it stops there. And it also illustrates to you that there's a big space right here, which is between this pulmonar and this pulmonar, which is not part of the third ventricle, but rather part of the quadrigeminal system. And again, you see right here, big space between the pulmonar. One of my favorite questions when I teach residents is to put up an MRI and see what's that space. And about half the time, and I get on this, about half the time they tell me third ventricle. I say, why do you think it's the third ventricle? Well, it's between the thalamus. Yeah, it is, but it's part of the general system because the pulmonar is off the midline. The pulmonar is not on the midline. All right, so let's look at a slightly different version of image you already saw. And this right here represents the black dashed lines represent the position of the internal medullary lamina. Internal medullary lamina. It is a lamina, a delicate sheet of myelinated fibers that's dividing the thalamus up. And I think it makes it really easy to use this landmark as, again, a reference point. So we have a big structure here, which is the anterior nucleus of the thalamus. We have a big structure here, which is pulmonar. And the internal medullary lamina basically divides the rest of the thalamus into medial and lateral parts. And it has a big nucleus inside of it. And that nucleus is represented right here. And the internal medullary lamina comes along, opens up. The big nucleus here, then it kind of comes back. A piece of it goes this way, and we designate a piece going that way. So looking at this axial view then, we can divide up the thalamus into the main nuclei that we're going to be concerned about. The abbreviations that are here are over here, and I'll just explain them. On the lateral side, you have a VPL, ventral posterior lateral, ventral lateral, and ventral anterior. So you can see the words even tell you something about it. Ventral posterior lateral is more posterior. Ventral lateral is in line but lateral, and ventral anterior is in line but anterior. Everybody see? So the words tell you something. Pulmonar is back here. It's the big thing right here. It's very easy to see in almost any plane of section because it's like a big mass of stuff. So pulmonar is right here. Now, tucked underneath, in dotted lines here, but tucked underneath, and we'll see those as we go along further, especially looking at the system, is the lateral genicular nucleus and the medial genicular nucleus. They are related to vision and auditory input respectively. Everybody got it? Auditory and then the pulvinar is right here. And I put it like that because it kind of turned under. Okay, on the medial side, all of this area here is very large nucleus called the dorsal medial nucleus. Dorsal medial. And again, it's always medial to the inframedullary lamina. As you go back, as you go caudally in the hemisphere, it's also medial to the position of the sanctum median. Okay, now, any question on those? Because we're going to now look at main afferents and efferents of each of these nuclei. So everybody okay? Okay, let's look at this. First of all, I define here mainly the two types of nuclei we're going to be dealing with. Relay nuclei. Okay, these are nuclei that receive input from principally one place, and send it to a very restricted part of the cortex. For example, BPL receives information from the body on the opposite side and sends it to the somatosensory cortex. Okay? Now, and then you would say, well, yeah, but if I have a sensory input and then I start to associate results, okay, primary sensory cortex will send it on to other targets and will create memories and stuff like that. And examples are BPL, BPM, and lateral nuclei. Now, association nuclei are thalamic nuclei that receive input from a whole bunch of places. In other words, it doesn't come from one specific thing, and it may come from inside the brain. It may come from the somatosensory cortex, the visual cortex, as association fibers. So those are association nuclei. And they are not necessarily motor or sensory. They are association. So they may not necessarily be conveying motor or sensory information, but information from, in other words, if you were going to talk about memory, association nuclei are involved in memory. But many times those memories are set off by relay nuclei conveying information to the cortex. Everybody follow me? They're two slightly different things, but they're both receiving information and sending it on to the cortex. Everybody with me? Anybody asleep? Don't wait your hand. Okay, intralaminar nuclei, the sanctum median is the biggest example of that. And these are nuclei located within the internal medullary lamina, so it surrounds it. Sanctum median is our biggest example, and maybe the only one we're going to mention in this course. And we mention it because it's so big, it's just there. And so it has a shell of the internal medullary lamina around it, and it received a bunch of information from different places and sends it to a bunch of places. So these intralaminar nuclei collectively are also function as association. Okay, the other thing I wanted to make a comment on are the terms thalamic afferents and thalamic efferents. This may be self-evident to you now, and for that I apologize. Thalamic afferents are simply receiving stuff. You say you use your reference point as the thalamus. The afferents to the thalamus are this, and this. Thalamic efferents, again, using the thalamus as your reference point, efferents of the thalamus. In other words, information leaving the thalamus can be going to visual cortex, auditory cortex, sensory cortex, motor cortex. Those are thalamic efferents. So when we use the term thalamic afferent, deferent, that's what it means. And we are using the thalamus as a reference point. Everybody see that? When you use the term afferent, deferent, you need to have a reference point. And it can be anything. So you can say the hypoglossal nucleus contains cell bodies that are efferents to muscles of the thumb. You use the hypoglossal nucleus as a reference point. Everybody okay with that? Okay, I'm not going to spend much time on this. This is a picture out of your atlas, but it just shows the fact that there are specific nuclei of the thalamus have social areas of the cortex to which they project. Now we're going to go over some of these here to give you a little more idea. Okay. Now. We're going to do several relay nuclei right here. Remember, the relay nuclei get from a particular point or place particular information and send it on to a particular target. Okay, let's start with BPL. We've talked about that. Lateral nucleus right here. It's in the lateral part of the caudal thalamus. It receives afferent information. It receives from posterior column medial lemniscus, these are cross, anterolateral system, those are cross, and it also receives some fibers from the somatosensory cortex. In general, every thalamic nucleus that projects to the cortex receives some corticothalamic fibers, okay, from that part of the cortex. So that's just a general thing that we can all accept. So, this nucleus then receives from these two important systems right here. Please note that these two important systems are conveying information from the body and the head. The BPL doesn't get any of the stuff from the head. That goes somewhere else. Efferents from this nucleus go to the somatosensory cortex, and some go to area 4 in the BPL. But the efferents are to the somatosensory cortex. Okay, another relay nucleus, the ventral posterior medial nucleus, VPM, and it is right there. I draw it right under the letter something again, because the VPM is a smaller nucleus tucked underneath the VPM. So in one plane of section, it's more difficult to see, but it's tucked right under the underneath the VPM, and so that's a good reference point. Okay, now VPM is the face sensory nucleus, okay? So it receives information from the trigeminal system, which is cross. It receives from the trigeminal thalamic tract, from the principal sensory nucleus, and from the solitary nucleus, because solitary nucleus is getting information related to the mouth, taste. Okay, so some of that's going to go through that nucleus. Again, BPM is related almost exclusively to the head. Efferents go to the face area of 312 of the postcentral gyrus, and the frontal opercula, the things that hang over the insular cortex, some of it goes into that. But it's the face area that's what we're primarily concerned with. Okay? What do we got here? Oh, VL. We'll come back to ventrolateral nucleus in a later lecture, but this nucleus right here receives information from basal nuclei, which we're going to talk about. We've named them as we've been going on, but we're going to talk about them later. That information is from the ipsilateral basal nuclei. So, for example, this nucleus is getting it from the same basal nuclei on that side. It also gets from the contralateral cerebellum nuclei. So this one gets information from the cerebellum on this side and from the basal nuclei on that side. Now, you see we have a nucleus, or nuclei, I should say, that are related to nominally the somatosensory stuff, and a nucleus that is highly related to VL to motor stuff. So sometimes people refer to these as the sensory thalamus or the motor thalamus. Okay? So if you hear those terms, that's what that means. It's kind of a loose use of the language. Efferents go to the motor cortex, right? Where else do they go? Not visual, not motor, so they go to the motor cortex. And sometimes to what are called supplemental motor areas, which are 6 and 8. Now, let me just make one little comment here. When there's a problem with these two systems, the basal nuclei and the cerebellum, your patient would have motor problems. They have tremors, they have trouble walking, they have all kinds of motor issues, especially when you ask them to perform a task. But the important thing to remember is there's nothing wrong with the cortical spinal tract. It's absolutely normal. It is getting a garbled message from the thalamus to the cortex. You garble the message, you create problems in the terminus of the tract. So it's not a lesion of the cortical spinal cord. They're perfectly normal. Everything's fine. They're getting a bad message, so they send out a bad message. So if the patient has trouble walking or performing a task, stuff is looked at in the performance of an act. Okay. VA, right here. Okay, this is a relay nucleus, but also has some characteristic of association that it gets from the globus pallidus, substantia nigra, and from area 6 and 8, but not area 4. So it gets from a little wider area, and it projects, this is important, frontal cortex, area 6 and 8, but not area 4, and the orbital cortex. The frontal cortex, anterior to the precentral gyrus, is involved with behavioral type things, and the orbital cortex is also involved with that. So this nucleus gets information that's involved with motor things, but it is not specifically with motor cortex. Okay. Okay, now this is the medial geniculate. Right here it is, right here. And there it is, right there, representing its position. See, the pulmonar would lie up here. So these median lateral geniculate this way are tucked underneath, and in the lab you can see them on the surface. So there, if you lift up the hemisphere a little bit. Okay, medial geniculate gets information from the inferior colliculus, and that receives cross and uncrossed input, and it receives information from the auditory cortex because it's talking to the auditory cortex. So it's going to get some information back. And this goes to the transverse temporal gyrus, which is area 41. The epinym is transverse gyrus intestinal. So this is a relay nucleus in the sense that it gets specific information from the inferior colliculus and also from auditory pathways. Some of it is direct from the auditory pathway and goes to primary auditory cortex. Now, in like manner, we have a lateral geniculate, located right out here, sort of what would be right in this area here, and here it is right here. It receives afferent information from the retina and from the visual cortex. Because it's interested only in interpreting what you see. As a matter of fact, your retina is like a transducer. Your retina doesn't see anything. It gets information, turns it into an electrical signal, and then your brain takes the signal back and turns it into something that you recognize. And also gets it from area 17. Efferents, primary visual cortex, area 17. Again, relay nuclei, specific source, specific information. Okay, association nucleus. Okay, the anterior nucleus is an association nucleus. And you can see here that it gets information from the mammary body by way of the mammillothalamic tract, from the hippocampus, brainstem, cingulate gyrus, and I stop. But we could go, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this nucleus gets all kinds of information from a bunch of different sources, none of which is primary motor, primary sensory, vision, or auditory. And it sends efferents, this nucleus sends efferents to wide areas of the cingulate gyrus and projections to the limbic and orbital frontal cortices. So you can see it's also getting information from a bunch of different places and sending it to a bunch of different places. Association. Okay, another one, here's the dorsal medial nucleus right here and right here. And it's a similar type of nucleus. It receives from the ventral part of the globus pallidus, from the amygdala, all types of stuff. The substantia nigra, orbital frontal cortex, basal cortex. It receives stuff from all over the place. And it is projecting predominantly to orbital cortex and the frontal cortex. Again, an important point to just remember in a general sense. So these parts of the cortex that are involved in recognition stuff, that are involved in all kinds of behavioral things. And one of the things too I want to tell you is the frontal areas are involved in arousal. And what I mean by that is you get up in the middle of the night and something wakes you up. You don't know if your cat's walking on the bed or somebody's breaking into your house. You have no idea what it is because you're not awake enough. As your cortex is aroused by incoming sensory information So you have to, that cortex has to get information from the thalamus. It gets it from the more anterior parts of the thalamus. So that's really important. If the cortex cannot be aroused, you have a severely impaired individual because they don't wake up. And we can give you a couple of examples of that in a minute. Okay, pulvinar, oh boy, right. Big thing back here. It receives from the superior colliculus all areas of the visual cortex and all areas of the temporal. It is an association nuclei. Nucleus and it sends fibers back to the superior colliculus, back to all these visual areas, and back to all the temporal areas. So all the visually excited cortex talks to the pulvinar, and pulvinar talks back to all the visually excited cortex. Now, you don't see anything in the superior colliculus. Okay? In other words, that pathway, the retina input to the superior colliculus, you don't see anything of it through that pathway. You're walking down the hallway, this is what you see. You're walking down the hallway, you turn the corner, and you go like this. Okay? Because there's something in your visual field. You don't recognize it in that instant. And then a few milliseconds later, oh, wow, okay, go around. So, and you see in my example, I went like this. Okay? Tectospinal fibers, which originate from the superior colliculus, descend to the cervical level of the spinal cord and give you the reflex action of the upper extremity. A question on that? And again, I think we'll go over that when we get into these systems. Interlaminar nuclei is the same thing. There's something in the end. We talked about that. You can see it has all these inputs and going to all these places. So it is interlaminar in the sense of its geographic position. It is association in the sense of what it does. Okay, here's our man. Okay, fell, he couldn't get up. What does that mean? Vascular. Something vascular, most likely. If you have a brain tumor, you don't all of a sudden fall unless it hemorrhages or something like that. Okay, he had weak lower extremities, a little more on the right than the left, and a decrease in the discriminative cuts also in the lower extremities, a little more obvious on the right. Brain and nerve exam is normal. Okay, is there a localizing sign? Well, the localizing sign in this case would probably be motor and sensory losses on the lower extremity. Because again, only certain places you're going to get that without anything else. And it's not going to be in spinal cord. Okay? Where in the central nervous system might this damage be found? Where would you particularly specifically put it? Okay, let me ask you another question. This is likely, I will answer the question. This is a, it is likely, is this likely slowly developing a rapid? It's rapid because the man fell down. Okay, and other possibilities. Well, let's look at them. Isn't that cool? Not for the patient, but isn't that interesting? Okay? What part of the cortex says that? Tell me specifically. Look at the section, and then tell me exactly where that is. Answer? I'm sorry?
Somatosensory cortex?
Speak up.
Somatosensory cortex?
Say again.
Somatosensory cortex?
Okay. What's that structure right there? Tell me specific. We had it earlier lecture.
Corpus callosum.
What part? It's big, it's fat. On mid-sagittal view, what part of the corpus callosum is
Splenium.
big fat? Splenium. What is straight above the splenium in the hemisphere? The paracentral gyre. So, this is something in the paracentral gyre. And what we have here is something like this. There's the anterior cerebral artery right there. It's coming over here. It's branching. One is going this way. It's branching there. One is going that way. You have a zygous vessel, a single unpaired vessel going to both sides of the hemisphere. Because there's no anterior cerebral coming off on this side right here. So that gives you bilateral deficits. It could be a little bit more on the one side, a little bit less or whatever, but bilateral deficits in that particular position. Can't be thalamus, can't be internal capsule, because it's one thing that causes the problem. Everybody with me? Azygous, single or unpaired. Now, one other complication that he could have handled it, what would that be? Based on where it is. In both paracentral lobules, if you will. Sensory, somatosensory pain temperature. He doesn't have any pain temperature loss. And that's not so unusual, but he could have had it. And if this is not resolved, it may come up later. Everybody see that? Vascular territory. You can tell where it is by using your mid-sagittal root to localize that. Big fat thing right on the midline. Only can be splanted. Can't be anything else. All right. Please read these at your leisure.